I'm Ben Sebastian, here with my co-host S.A. Baz Collins for this week's Written on the Edge Season 10, Episode 12 interview. We'll be talking with Elizabeth Costello and discussing her debut novel, The Good War. So let's get to know our guest. Elizabeth Costello is a writer living in Portland, Oregon. Her publications include the poetry chapbook RELIC and arts and culture writing for SF Weekly and 7 by 7. She works remotely as an editor for UC Berkeley and co-founded the Ekphraestival, a generative exchange among visual artists and poets that culminates in readings and exhibitions in April, National Poetry Month. Her debut novel that we're discussing today, The Good War, is out now from Regal House and was described by Publishers Weekly as dark and intense, lyrical, moody and atmospheric. This gritty tale is worth a look. Elizabeth, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
Never give quotes to a voice actor.
I was going to say I love how you delivered
Yeah, I know.
that.
I suddenly went trailer on us, you know?
So, obviously, writing is in your blood. Where did it all begin for you, though?
Oh, that's a good question. You mean this book or just overall?
Overall, when did you first put pen to paper and decide this is who I am?
Oh, that's such a great question. I grew up with very bookish people, and I've always read a lot, and I feel like I've just sort of always written, kept journals. And this isn't the first novel I've written; it's the first one I've managed to get published.
Nice.
But yeah, I think it's just sort of something I assume, that I read and that I write. Yeah.
So, the question of the hour, do you have any of those original journals? The ones that filled with teenage angst that make us all go, no.
I kept a lot of journals for a while, but then in the course of moving recently, I boldly I had a big box of them, maybe not going back that far, but
Sure.
back into like my 20s. And I just looked at the box and I thought, okay, these ones, I know these were some interesting years, like I was traveling or whatever. And so I'll keep these. And then I just randomly, I got rid of two-thirds. I just was
Wow.
like, I just tossed them because I was like, you know what? I'm always going to be writing. I really don't need have every single word I ever wrote. It's
Nice.
really okay. I'm not going to harvest all of this raw material, as juicy as it may be.
Nice. I mean, that's just the grown-up purge, right?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, I like getting rid of things better than I like acquiring
You Mary Kondoed your collection.
Yeah, there you go.
Totally.
There you go.
Totally.
Well, so let's talk about The Good War. Obviously,
Yeah.
like you said, not your first novel, but the first one to make it into the world.
Yeah.
If I were to see it at a book event or an egg festival and I saw it on a table and I was like, what's this about? What would you tell me?
Well, in short, I'd say it's feminist noir, queer coming of age.
Love it.
It has two storylines, 1948 and 1964. And in the 1948 section, the protagonist is Louise Gall, who is a mother of four, former Rosie the Riveter, and a chemist at the NIH. And she's based on my grandmother a bit. So
Neat.
there's some roots in the, family history. And then the 1964 section, it's her daughter, Charlotte, who's living in New York City, and she falls for the butch next door. She has this sort of lesbian awakening, and she also reckons with her own desire to make art. She's kind of been raised to support her brother, who's a painter, and she's kind of like, hey, what about me? And she steps away from her job in publishing. Well, she actually gets fired, and she has her reasons, as we all do. And then she kind of steps into a more bohemian life, and she really gets woken up by this affair with the butch next door.
Wow. So you got to dip into women in 2 points in history, both before Stonewall.
Yeah,
How did you do
yeah.
your research?
Well, many, many different sources. I just was on a panel at AWP about historical fiction, and we talked a lot about, how important it is to get your hands on some primary sources if you can.
Hmm.
And I was very lucky that I had an aunt who sent me a bunch of letters among the members of my family on whom I based some of my characters. So I actually had some really wonderful primary sources in sort of a family archive that just arrived on my doorstep, which was fantastic. I know, what a
What a
gift, right?
gift, right? Yeah,
I
thank you.
mean, she didn't even know I was working on this book, and so it was a complete, just serendipitous thing. And what was really great is that there was a letter from my grandfather. who was at the time a prisoner in the Philippines, a prisoner of war. And he wrote to my grandmother, who was living, well, actually, she was living in Los Angeles at the time. But anyway, in the book, the character's living in Maryland. And he wrote to her and said, "Why don't you write to me?" And I think, she probably did write to him, but just in the archive that I have, there are not a lot of letters from her. But I just thought that was a really interesting narrative thread. So, just a frame, a question to ask.
Mhm.
So, why wouldn't she write to him? Why wouldn't this woman at home? So anyway, that's sort of going down the rabbit hole. But to back up and say, for my research, I did, I read the family things. I had a great grandfather, also his war diary was published. So I had that, which talked about his time as a prisoner. And then I also just read I read some cultural history. There's a book, The Gay Metropolis, talking about New York City. Also just kind of pulp fiction, like the Anne Bannon novels. I read Leslie Feinberg. That informed my work. And Studs Terkel's The Good War. And yes, I did use the same title. And that's just such a great cultural history, just capturing the voices of people who actually experienced the war and kind of complicating the glamour of it. It's not just sort of, oh, we won and it was morally unambiguous, because war is always morally ambiguous and there are always people who suffer. And anyway, so I just think it's really important to read everything you can and read some newspapers from the time to just sort of get the tone of the time. And watch films, like certainly noir film is important to me.
Right.
The movie Kiss of Death comes up in the 1948 section, and I love Richard Widmark in that. It's so evil. It's so great.
So obviously, a lot of war stories focus on the folks who are on the front lines, or at least in the support tents. But you're writing from people who are still at home,
Yeah,
which is a voice
yeah.
that's not often heard. We see one on occasion, but that's such an important voice too, because they were the support structure.
Yes. Well, I'm glad you bring that up because I thought about it a lot too. And I thought about, the women, the kind of, the cliche is sort of the Penelope figure, right? The
Hmm.
woman just kind of waiting and pining. But they weren't, they were working too. They were soldiers too, as my character Louise says, like she was going and working at Lockheed, and building things on the line. And she actually became a designer of airplane parts, so kind of moved up from the line, more of an industrial designer. And so I think there were people working hard at home. And also, I think, and something that really drew me to this book was this idea that there might be a longing to be part of it. Not just that you're missing your loved one who's fighting, but that you want to be part of the big story, the real action.
Yeah.
The same way that, male soldiers dream of the great glory of being in war, the women too wanted to be part of the action. And so that was something that I wanted to explore as
Yep.
well.
I mean, that hits home. So I'm in Madison, Wisconsin, and just south of me is a town called Beloit, where there was a huge factory that made parts for ocean liner, specifically military ships. And I do know that the women who worked during both of the war eras you discussed were the factory workers. And there are several, so I have friends who live down there, and they live next door to one who to this day would not speak about her time in the factory because it was considered such a classified thing that they were building. And they were part of it, and they were made to feel part of it by being trusted with these secrets of how these machines were built. Like
Yeah.
the women knew that they were the engineers.
Yeah, and how frustrating for them when the
Hmm.
men came back and them being sort of, pressed back into the home.
Exactly. And nobody said thank you.
And nobody said thank you. And you got these skills, you got these technical skills, and you thought maybe you would be able to use them.
Hmm.
And then there's, that whole kind of suffocating cultural shift that really happens in the 50s.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like in the 40s it was still there was still this kind of openness, or things had
Well,
been
it was descended.
upended.
It was descended from the moderns, from the 20s when women first started to enter the workforce, and it kind of because of the 30s and the depression, people got work where they could, and it just became a survival thing. And then the war effort came on, and so I think you're right. You get through the end of the 40s, and then suddenly it's like, oh, okay, we're going back to everything way before the modern era, and we're gonna, put women back in the kitchen where they belong, kind of. And it's like, wait a minute,
Yeah.
hold it right there.
Yeah, yeah. And if you go even further back in history, there were points in the 18th century where actually women were more in the marketplace and selling things and out. And then there was sort of like this shift later in the 19th century to sort of develop, Republican womanhood. And in sort of like in the 1840s, like, let's go back, let's put, if you're middle class, like as more people became established middle class in the US, the idea that you didn't have to work was a marker of your class. So, but there was a time previously, like history isn't doesn't go like this, it goes like that, right?
Yeah.
It's jagged.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
It is a corkscrew is more like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but that highlights the point. The next point is that your work is relevant.
Why, thank you.
The plight of women working in the world today cannot be ignored. The fact that the glass ceiling still hasn't been shattered really needs to be pointed out, and it harkens back to the history that the women in your book went through. And again, like I wasn't really lying with the corkscrew analogy because history does go in these weird, not tight circles, but weird cycles.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I think thank you for saying that. And I think that's really true. And we're not done with, and there's still not parity in pay. There's still, a lot of assumptions about women's time and yeah, availability to do the grunt work, willingness to do the grunt work. Yeah, all of that. It's still going on.
It,
Absolutely.
and,
It's
not to be
it's just
entirely
really,
political, but look at what happened last week when two women mothers on either sides of the aisle in Congress asked for equality, family home equality after birth, and the head of the House threw a hissy fit, took a soccer ball, and went away.
Oh man, it's
yeah.
classic.
You just find out, no matter how much we like to think we've evolved and moved forward, the needle really hasn't moved very much. I mean, it's sad to say, but that's where we are. And I think one of the things I'm kind of becoming to realize, I had a conversation with a good friend of mine. She's a Wiccan, and she said, "Oh, we're entering the age of Aquarius. This was heading into the 2000s." And I remember this in the 90s, and I said, "Well, what does that mean?" And she said, "Well, the veil of what we perceive to be reality is going to be ripped away. We're going to have an awakening, and it's going to be painful, and it's going to be really shattering for people to real." And I'm like watching the events now, and I'm like going, because even conservative people are like, wait, we didn't vote for this. I mean, they're really finding out in that FAFO thing. They're really finding out now the things that they were led to believe may not be true. Shocker, clutch the pearls, but and those of us on the other side are like, well, we've been saying it, but and it's really kind of fascinating to me, even like, with Kamala's run and everything, you look at it and say, how much the Republicans denigrated the fact that she was an accomplished woman, and they try to make it sound like she was some DEI hire. I'm like, girl, she worked for that shit. I know
Oh,
she did.
oh
You
yeah.
know, and it blew my mind how very, very twisted American society is in that respect,
Oh yeah.
that women have contributed so much and how little they're given their due for it.
Yeah.
It just really is. It's aggravating, but it's fascinating at the same time. It's like, where the hell are we going with this?
Yeah, yeah, no, and Louise really struggles with it. My character, who is the scientist, and she really is one of these women who she had her kids, but she feels a little bit like, she could have had more of a career as a chemist and so forth. And the NIH does give her a leg up, and in my research about the NIH, I did see my sense was that they are and were more of an equal opportunity employer than a lot of places. And of course, that's, the terror that I have about the current moment, about the tearing down of all of these federal agencies, which, I'm sure you can say there are things that can be done better, but they still have a target to hit. They still have, sunlight
Yeah.
rules, and they still
Mm-hmm.
do aim to provide opportunity. And if you look at photos of the NIH, even from the 40s, you see women and people of color in lab coats looking very comfortable, looking not like the support staff,
Right.
but looking like they're at least they're lab techs and scientists, and it's really, those agencies are really what we have, the closest thing we have to a meritocracy in this country, and a real leveler, a class leveler. And that's not unintentional, to smash the middle class. And one way to do that is to take down those agencies.
Right.
Anyway, that's another.
So jumping back to your
No,
book
but
then.
Yeah.
yeah. And I think I want to ask you about your book. Okay, so we talked about the 40s portion of it. So how does
Yeah.
the 1964 part play into it?
Yeah, so I find I always am interested in more than one narrative, and so the two
Mm,
narratives it just goes back and forth.
hmm.
And I thought a lot about how to make that transition interesting for the reader. And what I came to was to use a lot of sort of the some of the techniques and tactics of poetry, like to use imagery and repetition. So like an
Mm,
object that
mm.
appears in the 1948 section would also maybe appear in the 1964 section. I don't want to make it too neat, but like say
Right, right,
there's
right.
this ashtray that's like a kind of experimental, it's like a metal ashtray with stork legs, that Louise got in New York City one time, and then her daughter has it, in 1964. There's a lot of smoking and drinking in this book,
Well,
which
yeah, there it
there
just
has to
was.
be. There has to be.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I tried to make that kind of like there be like help the reader take that ride back and forth by repeating some
Mm,
imagery, repeating some sort of verbal tics and phrases, that maybe Louise says a certain thing and then Charlotte says it in a certain way. So yeah, I just tried to, the way we do with music too, like you have a verse and a
hmm,
chorus, you have,
hmm.
Mhm.
so that's how some of that went on. And the 1964 section has a lot about music because Charlotte is a huge jazz fan, and she's really blown away by Eric Dolphy's Out to Lunch, and she gets really obsessed with that record. So there's a lot of talk about music, and that also came from, I was working on that section during the pandemic, and I found that I kept having this fantasy of being in like a smoky New York City jazz club in the mid 60s. And I was like, that is exactly where I am not right now. So I
Yeah.
think I was like, I just want to be in a crowd and everybody's smoking and drinking and there's great music going on. But anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nice. Well, is there anything about the Good War we didn't think to ask that you want folks to know? And I know we didn't talk about Charlotte's Awakening really, so open door if that was something you wanted to discuss.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's so important to find the right person to love, and it's so important to realize that society at large has nothing to do with that, and that, to discover the power that desire is, and so that was important for me there. There's also it's kind of there's a big theme of poetry within the book.
Mhm.
And so there are the two sections that go, the two narratives that go back and forth. And then woven in between them, there are little couplets from a poem, the sort of a long poem that's sort of one of the, it's a bit of a give, I don't want to give it away, but there's a character sort of trying to manifest poetry, let's say. And So there's a theme of that as well. And there's also that plays into the kind of supernatural, it's more like psychological, that blurry sense. There's the presence of the dead
Mhm.
in the book, in particular Roland, the father, and the husband of Louise, the father of Charlotte, and he's kind of trying to, he's a restless ghost, shall we say. And it does the book decide if he's real or not. I think it's sort of intentionally ambiguous. I hope that a reader would be open to the possibility, but also to recognize that sort of blurred line between the psychological and the supernatural.
I love it. I love it.
Thank
All
you.
right. Well, it's selling everywhere, but we highly encourage people to go to the publisher's website, Regal House Publishing, pick up the book there, support the small publisher.
Yes, yes.
Elizabeth, let's talk about Ekphraestival, PDX. It's going on now.
Yeah, yes.
What is it, and why should people know about it, and why should people who live near you go to it?
Great questions. Well, if you like poetry and you like artwork,
Mhm.
visual art, then you should check it out here in Portland. We started last year. It's actually great. I met when I first moved to Portland a few years ago. I took an excellent charcoal drawing class at a place called Wildcraft Studios. And they're really great. I highly recommend them as well. And there I met a painter named Ruth Measure, and she has a gallery called Soliloquy Fine Arts.
Neat.
And she and I started doing some events together. And last year was the first year of the Ekphraestival, and I gathered some poets from the Bay Area and Portland to come and sort of have their work responded to by visual artists that Ruth lined up. And so we had a series that last year, and then this year we flipped it around and did it the more common way is for poets, to write about poetry. I mean, rather painting or visual art. So we went back to that here. So I had the poets respond to the work of visual artists. And then this year we were bumping it up a little bit. There's a small prize for we had a wonderful, my dear friend Ma Shine Win, who's a wonderful poet in the Bay Area. She's the judge for the poetry contest, and then we had an artist here judge the painters, and so we get a little bit of prizes to go to the people who participated. So the painters submitted work based on the theme of intertwined, which I think is a good theme, to remember how we're all connected to each other.
I love
And then
that.
the poets responded to the painters. And last night, actually, there was an event with our friends at the Writer's Block and Blackfish Gallery, and they had a first Thursday opening, also part of the Festival. And then tonight we'll open with our first of, we're going to have a series of 4 readings at the Soliloquy Gallery, which is over here in Southeast Portland. And yeah, and so the poets will sort of stand in front of the artwork that inspired them and read it. And it's always fun. It's great because, the poets and painters always make a connection to each other. And
Right.
yeah, it's delightful.
Well, what a way to engage all the senses too.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah,
Love
I
it.
think so.
So, where should people go to find the schedule of events for the festival?
They can go on Instagram at Ekphraestival PDX, and it's a little bit weirdly spelled, but Ekphraestival PDX. They can also do Soliloquy Fine Arts
Okay.
that will be listed. And if you follow me, I'm at Mame Ozenfant, which sounds weird, but MameOzenFant
Perfect.
on Instagram, and I'll also be posting updates about the Festival there.
Perfect. Perfect. Perfect.
Yeah.
Are you curious what Wrote Podcast is all about? Wrote stands for Written on the Edge, and we are here to bring you weekly discussions about LGBTQ storytelling. That's right, all genres, all mediums, wide open. So our guests will share personal accounts of living their artistic lives, their personal experiences writing, crafting, stories, music, filmmaking, all of it. But what we like to do is explore the edges of what's accepted and where storytelling should be headed. Well, are you ready for our get to know you questions?
Sure.
Take it away, Bez.
I promise to be gentle. All right. Can you name a movie that was better than the book?
That was such a hard one. I don't know that I can. I really was like racking my brain. I guess I just think it's like, a different medium. But like I
Right.
really
Well, maybe that's the way to look at it. Is can you name something that maybe did it in a different way, but elevated the story? Or I don't know.
yeah, I mean I loved Carol, and I loved
Mhm.
the book that it was based on, The Price of Salt. I mean, I love Patricia Highsmith. And I just think, yeah, they made some interesting choices. It's changes that were the differences between the book. But yeah, I mean, I think that's a beautiful movie. And yeah, I was really trying to think of it because I felt like I should have been able to come up with one, but I just think they're really kind of different things.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. All right. Well, what fictional character would you most like to be friends with?
Well, I was thinking a lot about Frances from The Paying Guests by Sarah Waters, and I mean, I just want to give her support. I just want to be like, it's gonna be okay.
Oh,
It's gonna work out. I know things are looking really dire here, but um, I just want to lift her up. I heard that Todd Haynes is working on a film adaptation of The Paying Guests. I certainly hope so. That would be
Well,
fantastic.
wow.
Yeah.
cross fingers because the last one he tried was trying to put together didn't come together. So
Oh, I
we're
didn't know
pulling for you,
about that.
Todd.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. All right, all right. So, what's the most fascinating fact that you know?
Ooh, that's a terrible question. I have no idea.
After all your research.
After all my, well, oh gosh, what's the most fast? Well, I don't know if this is a fascinating fact, but a funny story that I can tell is when I was reading my great grandfather uh, was Paul D. Bunker was his name, and his war diary, Bunker's War, was published by Presidio Press, and he was also imprisoned in the Philippines and anyway, I reference, there's a character like him in my book and so forth. And there's this story that doesn't make it into my book, but always cracks me up that I was reading his war diary, right? And there he is on Corregidor, and the Japanese are invading, and the bombs are dropping. But he's still kind of just telling you, the sort of details, regular details of his life. And he was a commanding officer. He was up there, so he's not maybe digging the trenches at that time. But anyway, one day he talks about how he got invited over to have donuts somewhere, and he writes that he was displeased that they are the cake kind of donut instead of the fritters. And I'm like, you're worried about that when the bombs are dropping? Like, you're still worried about what kind of donuts you
You
got?
know, people have their likes.
Priorities.
Creature comforts in time of stress.
That's right. There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I
All
don't
right.
know. Yeah.
All right. So, what was your favorite subject in school?
Well, I always liked history. I always liked literature, of course. And I had a moment where I really enjoyed biology and geometry too. And then I kind of just sort of lost the thread of the math and science. And in some ways, I wish that I had gotten more encouragement to pursue those things. But I like science for the layperson. I like also physics for the layperson. I like to read a lot of those kind of books, just to geek out and have a moment where I think I understand something about subatomic particles, but I couldn't possibly explain to you what I've learned. It's like, oh, yeah. Anyway, but yeah.
My husband's a physicist that worked with JPL, and he has books that are literally the high level. I call them my picture books because I get to look through and look at the graphs and try to figure out and pretend I know what it's all about.
I mean, it's a great way to just get into an abstract frame of mind, I guess.
Yeah, right. There you go. Totally get it. All right.
Yeah.
Before making a telephone call, do you rehearse what you're going to say?
It really depends on the call. I feel like I used to do that more in earlier stages of my life. And now that I'm a little bit older, I'm kind of like, oh,
Yeah,
hopefully I'll figure it
exactly.
out.
I'll just roll with it.
Yeah, I'll just roll with it,
All right. Okay. Well, what current event or causes are you passionate about?
Oh, I mean, so many at this moment. Just speaking.
Pick a card, any card.
Yeah, I mean, we need to be protective of one another in the queer community. We need to stand up for workers' rights, workers of all stripes. We need to be aware of what's happening to the environment. And yeah, so many things. Yeah.
Okay. Well, if you could visit anywhere in the world, where would that be?
I've never spent any time in Ireland, and I've been just a little bit in Dublin, but I would love to go, farther afield and out into the country and My father's people are from there, and I mean, they've been in the States for a long time, but I would like to explore that more. I've traveled a bunch, but yeah, I've never spent time there. So that's what comes to mind. But ask me in
Well, there you
5 minutes,
go.
I'll have a different one. But
Well, but Rosie lives there now, so you can go visit her.
yeah.
Hey, girl, what's up?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who, if anyone, was your first celebrity crush?
Oh, golly. Bugs Bunny. No,
In drag?
I did
Well said.
I did have like an affinity for bugs. I don't know, like I just, or maybe it was more like I felt like I had a little bit of bugs in me. So I don't know if
Yeah,
that's
there you go. There you go. There you go. Okay. Well, what's your personal favorite recipe that you make, and are you willing to share it?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I just love a good, sounds kind of obvious, but I just love a good vegetable roast, and just made a
Oh,
nice
yeah.
one last night. And you can do it different ways, just whatever vegetables you
Seasonal.
have around,
Yeah.
different seasons, seasoning too. Like I made a
Mm-hmm.
kind of a classic one last night with like thyme and oregano, salt, pepper, onion, garlic. But I also like the warmer spices, like with some turmeric and curry, and so you can kind of go that direction too. So yeah, I love a good vegetable roast.
There you go. Love that. Okay.
Mhm.
Well, you made it through the list. See, what's so hard?
Hey, yeah,
So
not too bad.
obviously, Ekphraestival is going on right now. People can pick up your book. Are you working on anything sort of future that you want to share, or is everything still sort of under wraps for the moment?
Yeah, I have a couple of articles I need to get out there. One that I've been working on that I really want to finish very soon is about James Tiptree Jr., who is actually a woman named Alice Sheldon. I don't know if you've ever heard. She was a wonderful science fiction writer. She wrote as James Tiptree for many years. No one thought she was a woman because she was writing a lot of hard sci-fi, and she had a really interesting background. Her parents were sort of explorers in Africa in the 20s, and she was over there as a child. And
So she was
yeah,
like this close to being Tarzan.
yeah, exactly. And I just think I think it's, anyway, I think she's really interesting. I love her writing. And I think one of the things that's most interesting about her is that people didn't think she was a woman, because to me her stories are deeply feminist and deeply critical of sort of patriarchal and hierarchical structures, as a lot of sci-fi can be, sort of critical of
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
of the world as we have it. But
Mm-hmm.
so that's an article I've been trying to get done for for a while. It's hard when you really love a writer's writing, because there's so much you have to choose, like I'm
Right.
choosing two stories to write about and really getting into them. And to me, they're very rich, and so it's hard not to get drawn on many a tangent. So that's one thing. And then I have a couple, you know, I always have a lot of pots stirring. I've started two other novels, and again, I have to make a choice about which one I'm going to focus on. But, there are only so many hours in the day, and I also have, like my day job.
Right,
And
right.
so, there's just a lot going on. But hopefully I'll get that Tiptree article out soon.
Nice. Well, and I did notice that on your website, elizabethcostello.com, you also had a very good summary of writings that you're doing. People can go check out your past works. They can see what's coming up. You did link to your Instagram, so people can hop over to there and find the other stuff. Am I missing anything?
Yeah, there's an S. It's elizabethscostello.com, which, because Elizabeth Costello was already, there's that J.M. Coetzee novel called Elizabeth Costello, so maybe that was it. But anyway, it's elizabethscostello.com, but
I am
that's
so
fine.
sorry.
Oh, no worries.
I have it right on my notes. I was just talking too fast.
No, I totally get it. There's always more than one Elizabeth. That's the thing. I found that in any group that I'm in, there's always more than one person named Elizabeth.
Wow.
So that's a good way to think of it. But yes, I think people can find a lot of info, and they could contact me through the site if they're interested in learning more about my work.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Awesome. Do you have any final words of wisdom?
No. I would just always say I've been signing my books Peace, Love, Poetry, because we need all of those things,
Love that.
There you go.
Awesome. Well, we would like to extend a huge thank you to Elizabeth S. Costello. Elizabeth, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. Oh, should I hold up the book or?
Yeah, show off the cover.
Oh yeah, let me change this.
Oh wait, we'll do that in a second.
Okay.
We can delete this little babble here.
Okay.
Let me quickly get through the closing of the audio podcast.
Okay, good.
All right, folks, we at Written on the Edge are proud to introduce you to new media by queer content creators. So if you enjoy learning about new artists or hearing our thoughts on entertainment media, please like and subscribe so you get the alerts for new episodes. Go follow us on YouTube. We are really building the channel out there with all kinds of stuff, not just amazing interviews like the one we had with Elizabeth today, but also talks about queer culture, queer history, and Baz and Albert are doing some great job looking at other media and introducing Albert to it for the first time.
Yeah, I scarred him with Handmaid's Tale.
I know you did. That's what I'm referring to.
I'm still paying for that one.
All right, this show was produced by
was
Rogue
not
Ravens
ready.
Media. For our disclaimers, links to social media, our listen stations, or to sign us with guests, visit www.roadpodcast.com. Tune in next week for your queer media fix.
Bye-bye.
Oh, what's that? Closing time. The bums rush in melody, dear.